This is a big election year in Hawaii. Voters will cast ballots for a new governor, 2 congressional seats, including one with no incumbent, a U.S. senator, mayoral races in Maui and Kauaʻi counties, all 76 seats in the state legislature, county council races, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Who are the frontrunners? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. The 2022 elections are just around the corner and Hawaii voters have the potential to shake up the political landscape here at home. Hawaii will look to elect its 9th state governor as David Ige has reached his 2-term limit. Because of redistricting, all 76 seats in the state legislature are on the ballot. Both U.S. congressional seat and 1 U.S. Senate seat will also be voted on this year, as well as the mayors of Maui and Kauaʻi counties and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. This will be the second election cycle with all mail-in voting. Officials are also looking to make voting more accessible for people with disabilities. There is a lot to talk about. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email us or call us with your questions. We also encourage you to get involved with the conversation on our Facebook page. Now to our guests. Scott Nago is the Chief Elections Officer for the state of Hawaii. He has over 20 years of elections experience. After receiving his degree in political science from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, he began his career in elections. He was appointed Chief Elections Officer in 2010. Wendy Osher leads the Maui Now news team. She has served as the news director for Pacific Media Group for nearly 20 years, overseeing the company's 6 Maui radio stations. She holds a degree in print journalism from the University of Southern California. Joining us via Zoom is Chad Blair. He has been a writer, editor, and teacher in Honolulu for more than 25 years. He covers political decision makers and their impact for Honolulu Civil Beat. Chad has worked as a journalist for Pacific Business News, Hawaii Public Radio, and Honolulu Weekly. And also joining us via Zoom today is Colin Moore. He's an associate professor and the director of the Public Policy Center at UH Manoa. He has contributed to Honolulu Civil Beat and appeared as a political analyst for Hawaii News Now. Let me start off with Scott Nago from the Elections Division. So all mail, how will this election look? How will it be conducted? How will you accommodate people who still aren't really comfortable voting by mail?
It's important to note that Hawaii does conduct elections by mail. 2020 wasn't done by mail because of COVID. We are voting by mail now. Your ballot will come to you. All registered voters will receive their ballot in the mail at least 18 days prior to the election. All you need to do is vote your ballot, make sure you sign the return envelope and drop it back in the mail, and make sure it's received and not postmarked by election day 7 p.m.
Received, not postmarked. So mail it in a couple days before.
Yeah, so you can mail it in, or you can drop it off in person at a drop box, or if you're still not comfortable with the mail system, you can go to a voter service center, which will be open 10 days prior to the election, up until election day, 7 p.m. on election day, and vote there in person.
Will there be more sites available for people to vote in person than before?
There will be additional sites, but they won't be open for the 10 days. They'll be open, there'll be like pop-up sites. I believe it'd be on in Wahiawa and the Windward side.
Hey, Chad Blair, you covered the last election. What were some of the things that surprised you about the way the mail-in voting happened and was executed?
Well, not to tease Scott here, we all know about this, but it took a long time for that first printout, as we still call it, came out. Was it like 11 o'clock at night? And we know the reasons why. There were still people waiting in line, Honolulu Hale, Kapolei Hale. But boy, the turnout really impressive, moving Hawaii up from the lowest just about turnout and really getting us not quite back to what we had at statehood when it was well over 90%, but it felt good to see people standing in line and caring. And that was exciting just as a voter and as a resident of Hawaii to see people care about their elections.
Wendy Osher from Maui Now, how did it go on Maui with the mail-in voting?
I think with the COVID pandemic, people were comfortable. It was a good timing for it, for people to get used to that. The people who are used to going to the polls, they still did that. So we still had lines at the polling places. But overall, it went smoothly on Maui.
Colin, what have we noticed about what happens when people use mail-in ballots? Does it change the way people vote?
Well, I mean, partly what I'll say first is it changes the campaign strategy a little bit because votes start coming in much earlier. This year, I believe they can start coming in, or they're going to mail out on July 26th. So that creates this window where you're not quite sure when your campaign needs to peak. And I think the conventional wisdom is that a lot of people turn them in right away, and then a lot of people turn them in right at the last minute. And so for campaigns, the challenge is you really want to get your message out right when the ballots are released, and then you want another big boost of publicity right before the election deadline. I think perhaps there might be a little more family discussions about how people are voting, because you see that ballot on the kitchen table. I think, and I don't have evidence for this, but I suspect that also contributed to our high voter turnout. People encouraged their children to vote, or maybe in some cases, the children encouraged their parents to turn that ballot in. Our turnout, we already talked about how it was extraordinary, but there's never been a state that moved to mail-in balloting and saw such a big boost that we saw. I mean, we're really off the charts in terms of how big of a difference that made.
Scott Naga, what explained that, do you think, that big change?
It's really hard to say. 2020 in and of itself was unique. I mean, you had the beginning of the pandemic. You also had a presidential election. We also was the first time we voted by mail. As an election official, I want to say it's because of the mail. I don't know if that's really true because, we did have the pandemic. People were affected by government, and people, wanted to make their voice heard because they were affected by government because of the pandemic. So it could have been some of that. It could have been some of the fact that it was the presidential election. But I mean, our goal was just to make voting as easy and simple as possible, and sending somebody the ballot automatically. All they have to do is fill it out, sign it, and return it. You don't even have to affix postage to the ballot. I mean, that's what we tried to do, make it simple and easy.
How large a proportion of the ballots would you say came in say the first week and a half?
So in the general election, in Honolulu alone, I believe in the first weekend when the ballots came back, I believe we received somewhere around 150,000 just in the first weekend, somewhere around that number. So that was the biggest bunch we've seen.
Was that about half of the total vote? Because I remember the total vote used to be around 250,000, and then it bumped up.
Yeah, so
I didn't mean to force you to your nose.
that was the biggest wave of ballots we've seen was in the first weekend or in the first return.
Chad, what do you think that? How do you see that kind of voting process affect the campaigns? Colin mentioned something about the publicity, but does it also affect how you deal with other candidates or what public appearances you choose to make? And does it literally move the whole election cycle up?
Well, Colin's spot on here. It changes everything considerably. I don't think you'll see as much TV advertising happening on the night before the primary, although if the races are close, particularly the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, and maybe for CD2, I think you could see some campaigns. I mean, what do they got to lose? Spend their money, get the word out. But yes, when do you debate? When do you show up for that Chamber of Commerce forum? When do you fly over to this island and that island? All that changes considerably. I think social media also will be more and more of a focus, all about trying to persuade voters right up to the last minute.
Wendy, did you guys see a last-minute crush of voters, or how did it affect the campaigns on Maui? Did you notice?
I think just because of the pandemic as well, a lot of more people were educated voters. They got to see the candidates in forums online and go back and visit them on social media. So I think that the people that voted were a lot more educated than they may have been in the past. That was one of the pluses of the last election cycle.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and plus Maui, you're covering such a huge expanse of territory.
That's right.
And it's hard to get a lot of people in one place, right? Because there's so many towns. Did basically the digital nature of the campaigning, you think it did help in getting the words out?
I do. For example, this time around as well, we had a mayoral forum with the Kihei Community Association, where all 5 candidates who had filed to that date had participated in it, and people were able to see their viewpoints about the South Maui area. So it's a little bit of a different approach this time around. I think people are a little bit more akamai about using the internet and watching their media online.
You know, at Hawaii News Now, we had a feature where we called it the job interview for the mayor candidates. And what we did was we did these long interviews and we posted the whole thing. And that's something that wasn't available in the past so much, as you could literally go with the internet and see everything that the candidate had done. Colin, how did you see the aspect of what we learned from the pandemic and how people now campaign? How much change has there been in that, do you think?
Well, I mean, it forced people to really there were two strategies. The expensive strategy was, to go traditional legacy media to buy advertisements, or to really invest heavily in social media. And I think a lot of campaigns did both, because it was much more difficult to do that traditional shoe leather campaign where you walk the district, you go door to door. And in some ways that's tough for new candidates or candidates who haven't raised as much money, because that's often been a strategy here in Hawaii, especially in our House districts, which are relatively small. You could basically knock on every single door in the district. And there are some politicians who sort of famously do that. Senator Stanley Chang, for example, became kind of legendary for, walking his district, knocking on every door. That strategy wasn't available as easily during the pandemic. And I think, it's come back a little bit. People still expect you to be out there sign waving. They still like to see at least that you visited, leave that little door knocker, that says you stopped by. But really, it really shifted campaigns, I think, to investing a lot more money in social media, even those who couldn't, pay for big TV advertisements.
I notice right now that you see people who are actually announcing that they're running for something. BJ Penn did this on social media, didn't even bother with the mainstream media. You had to go find him. I wanted to say, Ken from Maui writes in, mail-in voting, the last election I did mail-in voting, and it was so nice to be able to go online, research the candidates, and really think about who I wanted to vote for. It was the most thoughtful voting for me. A question for Scott Nago. 2 years ago, there was a coordinated media campaign about mail-in voting. Will you do that again? Is that something that's in the cards?
2 years ago, we did receive a lot of COVID money. That's why we could do a lot of that coordinated campaign. So this year, unfortunately, we don't have that COVID money. So we're trying to find other avenues to get the word out. So we are going to, get the word out, whether it be social media or traditional media, but we are working on getting the word out, but it won't be as big as it was 2 years ago because we don't have that COVID money.
So I think one question that I had and noticed is that so people get a ballot in the mail, mm-hmm. You have to convince them it's real.
Yeah, that's the hard part. We also, the other issue we were facing is that we didn't vote by mail last year because of the pandemic. That's just the way we vote. Hawaii votes now. Hawaii is a vote by mail state. Every registered voter will automatically receive their ballot in the mail. That's something we got to stress the importance of. Don't go to your polling place on election day because it will not be open.
If you lose track of that, I'm going to vote when I get closer. I mean, you still get at a ballot, right?
You can always go to a voter service center to vote. There's limited voter service centers. You can go to our website, elections.hawaii.gov, to find a list of voter service centers. Even if you voted, but you forgot to mail your ballot in, you can always drop it off at a drop box or a place of deposit. You can go to our website again. There's various places of deposits throughout the state. Just make sure you drop it off in the right county.
Chad, I was just, when Scott was talking, I was remembering after the election of 2020, how there was all these accusations about mail-in balloting, and because it affects the counting, right? It changes how the results are released, and it caused both sides to be suspicious of the other. Do you see that kind of raising its head again this year?
Well, it's happening in Pennsylvania right now in that U.S. Senate race between Oz and I forget the other fellow's name, but the Republican primary. And traditionally, and Colin, you're the expert on this, but so is Scott. The mail-in ballots, people that vote early, that fill that thing out and send it out, tend to be more liberal, more Democrat. And there's a suspicion that has been circulated among conservative circles, you got to vote in person and so forth. Well, suddenly Republicans in the Senate recount is saying, no, go and mail that vote in right now, do that. But it is something that changes the dynamic. I don't know what's going to happen this time. Nobody does. I hope that people have figured it out now, as Ken from Maui is saying, how nice to be able to sit there at your or Scott or Colin said this as well, sit there at your dinner table and talk it over and look things up online. I mean, that's really liberating.
You know, Wendy, on Maui, there's always the impression that there's kind of maybe a little bit larger conservative community, particularly on the masking issues and the vaccine issues, and that lines up to a certain extent with the voter suspicion issues. Do you hear that from folks there, that they're suspicious of our voter system, or people have a lot of confidence in Hawaii's voting system?
Not necessarily in the voting system. I think people are used to mailing in their ballots now, but in terms of the actual candidates themselves, there's been just this whole pandemic year, there's been a lot of people that are hardline either one way or the other. So,
you know, it's interesting because we were talking earlier that the Maui mayor's race is going to be one of the more vigorous races. Describe what's happening with that race at this stage, and how do the candidates kind of fall?
So we have, I believe, 6 candidates who have actually filed papers, 4 additional people who have pulled papers but haven't committed yet as of Monday. The 3 frontrunners are incumbent Mayor Mike Victorino, longtime council member, mayor, and then we have Rick Bisson, who is a recently retired judge who gave up his $200,000+ a year job to run for mayor. He said that a lot of the reason for that is he's looking for the future of his 3 grandkids. And then also Michael Molina, longtime council member, educator, and current council member. He got back in after a term limit.
Why do so many people want to run against Mike Victorino?
I think just for that reason, there's been a lot of division in these past couple years. The people that didn't want to wear masks or were impacted by their business, their families who suffered during the pandemic, just people who had personal impacts from the decisions that were made. I don't think that anybody who's in office right now has people, like, there's going to be people that are for you or against you. I mean, they've had to make hard decisions these past 2 years.
Colin, I mean, how do you see that playing out, not just on Maui, but across the state, the pandemic hangover, I guess I'll call it?
Well, I mean, you do see some candidates who are kind of running a populist style campaign. I mean, Gary Cordry, who's running for the Republican nomination for governor. I mean, I think that's a big part of his campaign platform, being critical of some of the COVID restrictions. I don't think you see this to the same degree you see it on the US mainland, but I think this will be part of BJ Penn's campaign too. I mean, he had a very, I think, relatively hostile confrontation during a Board of Education meeting where he was really critical of DOE policies with students wearing masks. So it exists here, but I don't think it really captures more than about 20% of the electorate. So I don't think it's going to be decisive in these races, but it certainly, I mean, there certainly are candidates who are running because of that anger that they felt, or they feel that, you know, members of their community felt under those restrictions. I don't think it's really hurt the mainstream candidates. I mean, if you look at the front runner of the governor's race, who right now is undoubtedly Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, nobody is more associated with the state's COVID response than Josh Green. That doesn't really seem to have hurt him. I mean, obviously there are folks who definitely oppose Josh Green, but, you know, he's been polling extremely well. And so that hasn't really turned into a liability for him in the way that, for example, there are candidates on the US mainland where, you know, because they were so associated with that response with masking, you know, it's really made their campaigns for election very difficult.
Chad, do you read it about the same way, that that's a fairly small minority in this state and it still remains primarily a Democratic state? Or do you see if, say, someone like BJ Penn actually gets through to the GOP nomination, which a lot of people think is a slam dunk? You know, my apologies to Heidi Tsuneyoshi, but do you see there actually being a chance for the Republican Party to see some revival this year?
Well, it really is remarkable how many people have pulled papers. I mean, the filing deadline is not until next Tuesday, but I don't remember seeing so many people. And there's at least 6 I wouldn't call them household names, but certainly BJ Penn, Heidi Tsunayoshi, Gary Cordery is getting up there as well. 6 Republicans vying for the primary gubernatorial race. That is remarkable. There is a palpable anger that is continuing over the mask mandates. And if something changes in the next few weeks, and we've seen what the caseload's been, things are going up, you wonder whether that might factor into our concern, putting a mask on again, having even a lockdown. I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't underestimate that anger that's driving a lot of those people to at least pull papers, and many of them to file to run for election.
You know, I want to ask Scott Nago, are you seeing a lot more candidates pulling papers this year before? Is it like, or is it just the fact of the reapportionment, you just have more races than before?
Yeah, so there are 118 seats up for election this year, all 76 seats in the legislature. So far, as of today, there were 248 candidates who actually filed for office, but we still have 2 more days to go, or 3 more days to go till the candidate filing deadline on Tuesday.
It's only 3 more days?
It's 3 long days.
It feels like it's been going on for a while. What else is happening on Maui that's interesting?
Well, there's been a little bit of a shakeup in the legislature. We have Senator Kalani English, who departed. So even before the elections, there was a shift in seats and positions. So people are just getting used to that. And then now we have Roz Baker, who's retiring after more than 30 years in office, and just a lot of shifts going around and spaces opening up where you didn't have them before.
There's a lot of ambition out there too. People have
Yeah.
been waiting for chances like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a question from someone saying, who is behind, Chad, why don't you try this, or Josh, who's behind the negative ads about Josh Green? I'm a voter and a local person, and I'm trying to understand it. I know both of you have looked into this. Chad, why don't you go first?
Thanks for that softball question, Daryl, as always.
Glad I don't have to answer it.
Yeah, are you talking about the Dub Brothers ad, and Josh Green is not a certified physician and so forth?
Well, it also was followed up by another ad that ran this weekend that questioned Josh Green's ethics, his salary as a doctor, and so on. It felt early to be seeing these kinds of ads. What's your read on what's going on there?
Well, I think whenever groups are filing these kind of ads, running this kind of stuff, it's because they know that negative campaigning still in this day and age can be very successful. And Colin's right. Josh Green, by all indications, has a very commanding lead, not only with the poll numbers, the latest we've seen anyway, as well as the money, the union endorsements. And this is what you do if you're trailing. You start attacking. Your question was, who's behind all this? I can tell you that it's something that we're still looking into, but there have been accusations that Vicky Cayetano's campaign somehow is tied to that. Vicky Cayetano has rejected that argument and said, I'm running on my own positions. I think some more information will be coming out, but it does tend to work. Colin, would you agree that negative ads still have an impact?
Absolutely. There's long been this myth that negative ads don't work in Hawaii. I couldn't disagree more. Not all negative ads are created equally, though. Some are much more effective than others. I think that this Victory Calls PAC ad, I don't actually think it is a very strong negative ad, but it is a relatively early one. And to get back to the caller's question, I think what they're trying to get at is this issue about coordination. Maybe folks don't fully understand what makes this problematic. So we don't know fully who is behind these, but US election laws tends to be very permissive. There's a lot of things you can do compared to most nations. But one rule that's very clear is that a campaign cannot coordinate with an independent expenditure group. So this ad is paid for by a PAC or an independent expenditure group. And the rule is they can't have any connection with a campaign. They can't talk to the campaign. They can't take money from the campaign. It has to be totally independent. If it is totally independent, they can spend as much money as they like. The rules for raising money is different, but it's this bright line in American election law, and that's what makes it a little bit troubling. And I think that that gets at the caller's question, and I'm sure journalists will keep investigating this.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to kind of feel for Vicky Cayetano. I mean, assuming that what she's saying is true, that she has nothing to do with these ads and can't control these people. it puts her in a very difficult position. She also has a very outspoken husband who said a few things that sort of hurt her campaign, and she's a newcomer to politics, at least as a personal experimenter in politics, and you can see how this would be difficult for her, especially starting off so far behind. How do you see the race playing out, Chad, in terms of going from here?
The governor's race for the Democratic candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's I've never seen anything quite like this. To have a prominent candidate like Kurt Caldwell drop out, even though it was pretty clear to a lot of people that was the right decision. And then to have someone who probably could serve in Congress for 30 years or more, deciding, no, I want to come back home, Kai Kahele in this case, running for governor. And this all happening, very close to the filing deadline in the primary. So in that regard, it's very, very exciting. I hate to say it though, at this late date, money is going to really make a difference. And Josh Green, I counted just today, I think he's now had over 30 fundraisers since he declared that he wanted to be governor, or even before he declared. Kai Kahele, meanwhile, is saying, please give me your $5 donation, right? Because he's not accepting PAC money and so forth. So this is really a remarkable change. We'll see whether it works out or not.
Wendy Osher, how's the governor's race playing out on Maui? Is there a lot of talk about it yet, or is it kind of like you've got a big mayor's race? What are people talking about over there?
I was going through the candidates, and I believe that there is one candidate from Maui, Selena Blackwell. She's an Aloha Aina candidate from Makawao who has filed papers for the seat. But I know Kai Kahele, he's visited the island, and he had talked up the campaign before he actually committed to it. There's talk about it. I mean, people are interested after this recent term, so.
Is there a real sense that the neighbor islands need a governor who pays attention to them? Is there a sense that Oahu is just in control of everything?
Of course, there's always that little bit of I'm from the neighbor islands and we want to be heard because Oahu has such a large population and a voice.
But I mean, is it like, does that mean that a neighbor island candidate like Kai Kahele might have a better shot at doing well on Maui? Maui's always been important to statewide elections.
I think people pay attention. If they're from the neighbor islands, they get a little bit more shine.
I wonder if people have sort of almost forgotten about Linda Lingle because she was based on Maui and she managed to win the election.
I don't think she ever really went away. I think she's still very active in the background.
Oh, she is. Okay, well, interesting. We'll talk about that some more too. Colin, your take on where we're going. Is Kai Kahele really? Do you see him as a really viable candidate at this stage, given the way he's conducted his campaign and so far his lack of presence on major media? My wife the other day said, "Oh, I finally saw a Kai Kahele poster in Makakilo."
He's got a real uphill battle. I mean, I think he's certainly a viable candidate. He has tremendous name recognition, but he got a lot of bad press relatively recently, and he was really behind in the money race. I mean, he's tried. I think it was a strategic move to turn what was a liability, not having enough money, into an advantage by saying he's not going to take outside funds and he's relying on public money, but there's a threshold he has to release. So I think it's going to be tough for him. I mean, I suspect he hasn't even broke 20% if we did a poll, and he's got a lot of ground to make up. And really the only way to do that is for a statewide race like governor, you've got to be on TV. I know we talk a lot about social media and that's tremendously important, but for a big statewide race running for governor, you need to have those big TV ad buys. You've got to get your name out there. And I think that a lot of people are just not fully aware that he is running for governor. I suspect some voters are probably confused because there's been so many candidates coming in, leaving this race. I bet they're wondering, wasn't he running for Congress? Now he's running for governor. So he's got to do a lot of work to make his message clear. And the only way to do that is to have the money to get yourself on television. That really, for a big race like this, that's what you've got to do. Vicky Cayetano, of course, I think she's struggled a little bit raising money as well. That's why you haven't seen a lot of ads from her. And really, Josh Green is beginning to roll out those ads. And you're going to see more and more and more of those. And it's going to be harder and harder to close the gap because, like we said before, we're an all mail-in state now, and people are going to start voting in less than 2 months. That's not a lot of time to make up.
I got a question from Anonymous. Who has applied for Congressional District 1 from all parties? The question is this at all a tough race for Ed Case? Chad?
Well, I know Gary Hoozer's probably out there watching right now, and he's going to tell you that Sergio Alcubilia has a chance. He certainly is raising a lot of attention. He's a first-time candidate for the 1st Congressional District. I think it's going to be very difficult to knock Ed Case off. He's a very established figure. I think there's been a forgiveness for him since his mistake to run against Dan Akaka back in 2006. Interestingly enough, he's actually served both the 1st Congressional and the 2nd Congressional District. So I think he's got a solid bet, but I do know that people that don't think Ed Case is as Democrat or as liberal as he should be are definitely gunning to take him down.
Wendy, let me ask, in the Congressional District 2, your folks' Congressional District, is there much interest there? And I'm wondering, Jill Takuda is from Oahu. She's what seemed to be the main candidate. Are there candidates that you folks are aware of that might be from the neighbor islands?
I believe Angus McKelvey pulled papers. He's the current representative for Maui. He pulled papers, but he ended up filing for Roz Baker's old seat. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to figure out, are there neighbor island folks vying for that seat? Have you heard of any? No, it's pretty quiet, isn't it? Let me ask Colin, why is there not that much interest in that seat? I was quite surprised that you didn't have at least one or two other people who are running for lieutenant governor try and hop to Kahele's seat. That's usually a real magnet for ambitious politicians.
Well, I think it's a timing issue. So I will mention one other candidate, Patrick Bronco, who just got himself elected to the House and now left to run for that race, a representative from Kailua. But he's going to have, I think, a real challenge going against Jill Takuda, who's much more well-known. So why aren't there more candidates? Well, there were two who considered it, two mainstream candidates, Angus McKelvey, who we just mentioned, Jarrett Keohokalole, the senator from the windward side of Oahu. For a variety of reasons, I think they just decided it wasn't their time. They couldn't mount a challenge against Jill Takuda. And I think that calculation went into it, that, there were better races for them. Keohokalole decided to stay in the Senate. McKelvey decided to run for Roz Baker's seat. But there wasn't a lot of time to think through this. I mean, I would give Jill Takuda a lot of credit for seeing an opportunity and seizing it very, very quickly, getting out of the LG's race and into the Congressional District 2 race before people really began to associate her with that LG's race. So, in a similar way, this was sort of how Kai Kahele won that race before. People weren't comfortable running against Tulsi Gabbard. He got in there early. And when Tulsi decided not to run for re-election, he really had established himself as the candidate for that race. So, like always in politics, it's timing, and it takes a certain amount of guts to get in there quickly and establish yourself as the candidate to beat.
A couple questions for Scott Nago from the viewers who I want to honor. For Mr. Nago, I think this is a viewer, Barbara in Kailua, wondering whether there could have been more of an education campaign. Did your department go before the legislature to actually request funds to get the word out this time around?
We're always looking for ways to get the message out to voters. It's just being creative and finding a way to make sure you get the best bang for your buck. Social media, like I said, we use social media. We do have a program, a voter educational program that we run monthly on YouTube, letting voters various topics on voting and what you need to do to vote or how to get ready to vote. We do run radio ads. We do have a lot of different types of ways we do get the media out.
So it sounds like you're saying you have enough money, but just to answer the person's question,
I mean, you could always use more money. I mean, voter ed is there's no limit to how much money you can ask for it. Getting them, it's like a campaign. Chad, let me ask you this question. Do you think, given your coverage of the legislature, that the legislature generally doesn't really want people too educated about elections, that they consider that a threat to their incumbencies?
Well, I think there's a reason why there's no term limits at the state legislature, even though you have term limits for the councils and the mayors, not for Congress. But let's put it this way. There's a reason also why incumbents win. Generally 90% of the time, it's really tough to knock off. I haven't seen, I mean, I got to give them credit. They finally went for mail-in balloting, right? It took them forever for that to happen. And I see them working more and more. They are giving Scott's agency a little bit more money. You'd think, Scott, with all that $2 billion plus, he might have had a little bit more for you there. But there was helping with voting centers, although I think some of that's coming from the counties. But you know, let's face it, once you get in office, particularly the legislature, a lot of those people are there for a very long time. Darryl, let me just add, Tommy Waters also strongly indicated interest in running for CD too as well. A couple things happened. Kaikahele waited forever to make his race official for governor. And I think that had some people to say, well, I can't wait, or I have to wait until you decide. There's also a lot of stuff that's been going on behind the scenes with unions, with special interest PACs that have, that's the reason why some people are running and others are not.
You know, on that question about educating voters, one of the things that we don't see so much, I know Civil Beat does a nice job with this, of featuring almost every candidate, giving people a place they can go. I think Maui now, you folks have service like that where people can go and learn about candidates. The media tries to do what it can, but one question is why the government, for example, doesn't have a flyer with all of the candidates' bios and so on there. And I think that was something that was part of the elections division years ago. And along those lines, this broader question, when will Hawaii enact campaign finance reform in order to level the playing field? Seems corporate development-backed campaigns are setting their sights on ousting progressive bodies like the Maui County Council. That's from La'akea. Do you think, Wendy, that money is just, that there needs to be a way to reduce the amount, the power of money on these campaigns? I know that's an editorial question.
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that, but.
Well, let me put it in the frame of that, of the Maui County Council. There is on Maui quite a development, anti-development schism. Mm-hmm. And the council has moved back and forth on that, right? And there have been big money campaigns focused on the Maui Council in the past. Is that happening this year on Maui again?
I really don't see a huge difference between the candidates in terms of money this year. In the mayor's race, there are 3 front runners with the biggest coffers, but for the council, I think people they're conscious of how they spend their funds and don't want to spend unnecessarily.
Is Maui, is it at large? That everyone votes for all the council members, right? But the council members have to come from a specific district.
Exactly.
Now, every island is different. Every year I try and figure it out, you know, when you're doing election coverage, like which island is at large, which ones are by districts, like Oahu and so on. Let me ask, though, Colin Moore, I mean, is there any progress out there towards leveling the playing field, as this caller puts it?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to tackle that. I think when people talk about big money in politics, they're often talking about what we call super PACs, independent expenditure groups. There's not a whole lot we can do at the state level to prevent those. I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled that essentially these independent PACs can raise as much money as they want, can spend as much money as they want, as long as they're not coordinating with the campaign. Now, there are much more strict rules for actual campaigns, how much money they can raise from individuals, how much they can take in terms of contributions. Well, I tend to think of this question a little bit differently. Rather than restricting money, I'd like to see us level the playing field with more public financing of campaigns, making that a little bit easier. Now, we do have a system of public financing here in Hawaii, one many candidates do take advantage of. This is what Kaikahele is going to try to do. That, I mean, essentially the way it works is there's a threshold, you reach that threshold, and then the state begins to match your contributions one for one up to a certain point. And you have to agree to a limit on how much money you spend. I'd like to see that program expanded. I think that would be a way to get more candidates running to create more competitive races. I think that's how I'd like to see this addressed, rather than the much more difficult problem of restricting campaign groups, how much they can raise and spend. You know, and I will say, I just want to get back to a point that was raised earlier, somewhat on this issue, which is that, of course, every seat is up for election this year, all the Senate seats, all the House seats. But if you actually look, there aren't that many competitive races. I went through, and of course, we have a few more days for people to file, but I counted, this is somewhat subjective, but how many truly competitive races I could find, whether in the primary or the general in those districts where there might be a Republican might have a chance. I could count about 4 truly competitive Senate races and about 20 truly competitive House races. So what I'd like to see is more public financing to make it easier for good candidates to get in there and challenge incumbents, because there's not enough incumbents who have to fight for their seat.
I came up with a very similar list. I did exactly that exercise today. And as you said, and it looks like people are kind of trying to find their path of least resistance to get back to their seats. This is a good question, and I'll let you, Chad, chew on this one first. Will we see legislature election results affected by or incumbents not run because of the cesspool bribery scandal? Now, that's the scandal in which Senator Kalani English from East Maui and Ty Cullen from Makakilo and Village Park got basically caught up taking money to influence legislation. I'm not hearing much about that this year, but Chad, do you think that it's going to have an influence on voters?
There's been so much corruption in Hawaii and Honolulu over the last few years. Louis K. Aloha, the Department of Planning and Permitting. Who knows what's going on with the continuing investigations. In many ways, I think we're a little bit numb to everything. And while I thought corruption would be a winning issue, I can tell you, by the way, the Republicans definitely think it is, and they've brought it up in their campaigns. But I don't sense that it really is resonating with people very much. I think crime, I think cost of living. I mean, look at a gallon of gas today, another record high, the situation going on globally, a lot of other things that people are really worried about, let alone COVID. So I haven't heard as much about Ty Cullen and Kalani English, as terrible as those crimes were.
When it occurred to me that on Maui, it was your senator that got caught up in that. What was the impact of that on politics in Maui?
I think a lot of people had opinions about it when it initially first came out, and we're just waiting to see the water settle and to see how the extent of how far or how deep it went, and if there's other people that are affected. They haven't really indicated where those investigations are going or if there are more people involved.
Yeah, it's interesting when we have these big investigations, how often they seem to hang out there right up till before the election. I'm wondering, Colin, do you see any 11th hour surprises coming out of the corruption investigations?
I don't really see 11th hour surprises. No, I mean, I do think want to go back to something you said, which is that the Republicans have been really active on this issue, and historically, the Republican Party in Hawaii has been really strong on anti-corruption, good governance stuff. I've always respected them for their positions, but they're probably going to shrink in this next election cycle. I'm not sure. Looking from a count I did earlier today, it doesn't look like anyone's going to run against Kurt Favela, the only Republican in the Senate. He's safe. Gene Ward is not challenged. He's safe, but the others are vulnerable. So it's possible we could go down to one Republican in the Senate, one Republican in the House. And I think that's really bad. If you believe in good governance and you want to fight corruption, that's something a competitive two-party system does. And I think that one of the things that led to the corruption scandals, the Cullen English scandal, is people being too comfortable, feeling like they're not really going to be questioned or investigated by an opposition party. At this point, it's really only the media that does this work because the Democratic Party doesn't have a lot of incentive to look into these things for their own members. So I would love to see a more competitive Republican Party in Hawaii. I think that would be one way to fight corruption, to lead to more transparency.
And we'll go from there. We'll talk about a bunch of Democratic primaries because there's not much interest in anything else. Chad Blair, handicap for me the lieutenant governor's race.
I'd be happy to. I would just add that I think Lauren Matsumoto is probably saying, don't forget about me too. So I think Colin's right, though. There'll probably be a reduction. But Bob McDermott is leaving to run for the U.S. Senate. Val Okimoto is running to leave for the city council, and so it's probably going to go from 4 to 2. but that's a minority. In terms of the LG race, it's funny, we haven't talked about it at all, but that's really a compelling race. Sylvia Luke, the Democratic candidates, Sylvia Luke, Ikaika Anderson, Sherry Minor McNamara, and Keith Amamiya. It's a pretty interesting field, and took a lot of people by surprise. It's been kind of quiet, not as much attention given to this race, and yet you look at the history of lieutenant governors, tend to move on to governors. Not always, but look at Josh Green. So I think that's a very interesting race. Sylvia Luke seems to have the lion's shares of the union endorsements, seems to have the lion's share of the campaign funds. It isn't over yet, but that's a race that I'm looking forward to watching closely.
And then we talked very briefly about OHA, but Colin, is there anything we should be watching for there, or where else do you see there being some good fights? Maybe in the City Council, Honolulu City Council?
Well, for OHA, I mean, OHA is always very difficult to predict. It's very difficult to run for OHA because you're essentially running for statewide office. A lot of familiar names there: Mililani Trask, Sam King, who's run before, is running again. In the council, I do think we have 4 council seats in Honolulu that are up. And I think there's going to be a fight for Heidi Suniyoshi's old district. That's District 2. We have a big wave surfer, Makua Rothman, running. That's a fun race. District 4, Becky Gardner is going to run against Tommy Waters. I suspect Tommy Waters will probably win that race, but he does have a legitimate challenge. District 6, Tyler Dos Santos Tam, who was the head of the Democratic Party, against Ikaika Hussey. Tyler Dos Santos Tam probably has the advantage, but he's not going to run away with it. And then in District 8, maybe the most interesting one, Ron Minor, who of course was on the council, is running again to serve on the council, and Val Okimoto, who is one of the few Republicans in the State House left to run for that council seat. So there's going to be a battle there, and I think these races haven't gotten nearly as much attention. They've kind of been washed out because of all the energy in the governor and LG's race.
Scott Nago, I get an interesting question from Facebook. Do any third-party candidates have a shot this year? And rather than answer that question, first, I don't know of any that really have a shot in Hawaii. The Democratic powerhouse pretty much overrides the third-party candidates. But how does a third-party or a nonpartisan candidate actually get from the primary election ballot to the general election ballot? I know the parties get to carry their candidates through, but the nonpartisans, those sort of folks, what's the threshold that they have to hit in order to get on the general election ballot?
So the nonpartisans need to hit a certain threshold. It's not simply winning the nonpartisan primary election, getting the most votes. You need to hit a threshold set forth in statute to move on to the general election. So it's not an automatic thing, but it's important to note that if you are a party that is not a Democrat or a Republican, but you are a recognized party such as the Libertarians, the Green Party, the Aloha Aina Party, you do move directly onto the general if you win your primary election.
How do those parties, though, maintain their status as parties? Do they have to get a certain amount of votes, or can you just be a party and always get to the general election?
So to begin to start a party, you would need to gather signatures prior to February. It's set in statute how many signatures you have of registered voters you need. Once you become an established party, you need to receive a certain amount of votes to maintain that status for the next election.
And so there's a chance that if no one pays attention to those parties in the general election, they could lose their status.
Yes, and shortly after the election, we do disqualify parties that do not make it. There's another way to also qualify if you petition. I believe it's X amount. I don't know the amount of times, but if you qualify so many times, you enter a 10-year period where you're on the ballot.
You know, Wendy, I'm remembering the Independence for Godly Government years ago. You know, the Nishiki's party and Kathy Oshijo and so on. That was pretty much a Maui-based party. Rick Reed was involved. Do you see third parties active on Maui, in Maui?
I know that the Green Party has been pretty active. There's Nick Hilananda who's running for District 13 this year. He's been an active member of the Green Party, and I think they're holding their convention soon. Other than that, I think I see popping up here and there the Aloha Aina Party as well. But the majority, obviously Democrat, and a few Republicans.
Chad, I got a question for you from a viewer. Please expand on your comments on special interest PACs. I don't remember what you said about them, but Ingrid is interested.
There are groups nationally with lots of money, groups like Emily's List. I'll just name one example. They're veterans groups that are focused on the congressional races, and with the House and the Senate up for grabs. I'm talking about the U.S. House and Senate. In fact, it's a very good chance that the Democrats are going to lose both the House and the Senate, at least based on the latest numbers. So then a seat in Hawaii, a CD1 or a CD2, counts very much. And I think you are going to be seeing some announcements pretty soon from some of these PACs that will throw a lot of money this way to make sure that a Democrat, their favorite Democrat, gets elected to the U.S. Congress. That's what I mean by that. I won't name too many other names, but there's also local labor groups that are very much focused on, how should we say it, who their favorite candidates are for office.
So that's within the Democratic Party, the sort of progressive versus conservative lineup that Ed Case was considered for more the conservative side, but then I think Kauaʻi was considered fairly progressive. But so there's money within the Democratic Party going toward more progressive versus less progressive. Is that what you're saying?
I am, and well, it depends on the groups. I think you are going to see, Emily's List, for example. They're going to endorse a woman who strongly supports abortion rights. That's how they do it. My guess is Jill Takuda is going to pick that over Pat Bronco. Maybe Pat Bronco is going to appeal to a military group. He has an interesting background, I believe, in the Foreign Service. But I don't think there's as much PAC money from conservatives that ever is really spent here. It just doesn't happen because it just isn't worth it. But for a Democrat to maybe lose a seat, that's a concern.
You know, Colin Moore, along those lines of progressive, middle of the road, conservative, business, non-politician, these different categories, could you quickly talk to us a little bit about what lanes the different candidates are in, say in the lieutenant governor's race, and what lanes the three candidates are in, the main candidates are in for the governor's race, in terms of labeling them as best you can?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the governor's race. I mean, I think both Josh Green and Kai Kahele think of themselves as progressive Democrats. Kahele is running more of a populist style campaign. And so I don't really see strong ideological differences between Vicky Cayetano is clearly running on her business credentials. So you have someone in that lane. She's clearly identified as someone who can make things work because of her business experience. For the LG's race, you have Sherry Minor McNamara, the former head of the Chamber of Commerce, and she's running with her business credentials. She's running as a business-oriented Democrat who supports small business. She says that repeatedly in most interviews. The others are a little harder to categorize. I mean, Sylvia Luke, I think, sometimes thinks of herself as a progressive. She's more of a traditional Hawaii labor Democrat. I think Keith Amamiya probably would maybe be the most progressive of those candidates, but it's a little hard to tell. Mikaika Anderson, somewhere in between. One thing about Hawaii politics is, with a few exceptions, we don't really have these stark ideological differences in a lot of our races. In fact, the one where that exists, where it stands out, I think is notable because it's so uncommon. And that's Scott Saiki and Kim Koko Iwamoto, the House Speaker, who's still going to have a very difficult challenge, who nearly lost his seat last time, from Kim Koko Iwamoto, who is clearly running at him from his left. But that's relatively rare here, which is very different from most states.
Let me ask Wendy, on Maui, do you see a lot of partisan division there, or what do you think people that you're familiar with, not just for Maui, but anywhere, what do they look at when they decide who to vote for?
I think they're looking more at issues. I mean, over-tourism was an umbrella issue that a lot of people are concerned about. Homelessness, the realignment of the highway on Maui, axis deer, overpopulation. People on Maui are really looking at the issues that are affecting them.
And is it easy to tell apart how the candidates stand on those things? Because all of those things they offer to fix.
Yeah, some stand out a little bit more than others. They obviously have their platforms, but that's what people are looking for. people to make changes for those particular issues.
Do you think, I'll let Chad Blair in 30 seconds sum this up. What do you think people look at most when they decide who to vote for in Hawaii?
Well, obviously, name recognition has a lot to do with it. But I will say something that I think sometimes can make a difference. And here's where Kai Kahele, as difficult a challenge he has struck a spark, a nerve in the state. He's tapping into some discontent and desire for change. And I don't know whether he can carry that to victory on August the 13th. But people are hungry. They're hungry for people that excite them and give them some hope. And Kahele has that more than Vicky Cayetano and Josh Green.
I got to say, I feel sometimes like Hawaii politicians are not that exciting. You know, I think that's one of the interesting things about Hawaii politicians. That's my editorial position for tonight. Mahalo to you for joining us tonight. And we thank our guests, Chief Elections Officer Scott Nago, Wendy Osher, News Director for Maui Now, and joining us via Zoom from Honolulu Civil Beat, Chad Blair, and from the UH Public Policy Center, Colin Moore. Insights is off next week. Join us Thursday, June 16th, as we kick off our coverage of election races with the leading candidates in the Democratic primary for Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.